I look forward to opening this up and having a conversation with you.
That was excellent. Professor, we got several questions. I want to just dive right into it. Tessa asks, what tools, practices, and skills do you use to uncover the underlying superficial problem? It sounded like you talked a lot about questions and asking questions.
Yeah, it's right. So, the Toyota production system would famously refer to the five whys, and they had and that was root cause analysis, which we all know. But essentially, what they found is that it's about five. Why does this exist? Well, why does that exist? Well, why does that exist? Like if you ask why five times, they found that that's how you got to the root cause. We find in practice the answer is closer to three. It's rarely one. So it would be the symptom and the cause are usually a few layers, and you want to keep asking why. So that's the first thing I would say is that we want to have make sure that you're doing root cause analysis. But the second thing on a specific tool, the tool that we like the most, we call the indignities list. And what you do is and the way we found out the symptom is we went to women in this company because that's what they said they were having a gender problem. When we asked the women, is there anything that's going on at work that it feels like it's just nicking your dignity? And it occurs for it happening to you or you observe it happening to other women. So you go in search of the indignities list. Every time we do this, you'll get a list of issues. Often they will sound trivial. When you start to get convergence on those indignities, we then ask you to convert those indignities to the dignity list. And
Mm,
in this case, it was the communication style. And you know what the awesome thing about that was? It was
mm.
free.
Wow. Can't beat free. Monique asks, can you speak more about how to amplify others' ideas and perspective, especially when they're from underrepresented stakeholders?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you very much. And so I'm going to go to here is my favorite visual to on the amplification part, which is the team I've drawn in the middle. It's a three-person team, and each circle represents a person on the team. And I'm showing that it's three circles in the middle, that those folks are very similar to one another. And then on either side, we have a team where there's difference among us. And this is where the underrepresented might come in. If we're not careful when we have underrepresented voices, we're only going to be seeking from them the parts of that overlap with us. So this is when we've invited them to the table, but we're not inclusive of their voices. What we want to do is make sure that everybody feels comfortable bringing all of their richness to the table, not just the part that overlaps. And so, what we find we need to do is be very solicitous about and saying with questions from your perspective, how does this sound to you? What else are we missing? Like, what I'm trying to do is get you off the scent of saying what you think I want to say, or even asking you to say what I want to say because it makes me feel better. But I want to be inclusive of all of the gorgeous uniqueness. And this, of course, ties to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I know has gotten a rocky go of things in the press. But what I'll tell you is, if I got to rewrite diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would have written it as inclusion, equity, and diversity. Because
Mhm.
I have seen organizations bring in diverse and underrepresented talent and not get the benefit from it.
Yeah.
So diversity may or may not beget inclusion, but I have never, ever seen an organization that was inclusive that didn't beget gorgeous diversity. So
Right.
be the first.
I appreciate you saying not just sitting at the table, but actually including and giving lift to people's voices. I also want to
Right.
talk about this friends thing you keep talking about, making new friends. First of all, how do I identify who's a friend?
Yeah. So in this case, I want the friend to be someone who is as different from you as possible. So the new friends, like who's worthy of friendship, not someone who you're already attracted to, not somebody who you're already hanging out with us. So here's the thing about humans. We really like people who are really like us. Doesn't make us bad people, but it just makes us human. And so what I want you to do is seek difference. Find people from different perspectives, and that'll be demographic difference, different lived experience, different learned experience. And so if we're senior faculty, let's invite in junior faculty. If we're all women, let's invite in a man. If we're all engineers, let's make sure we're bringing in the perspective of marketing. So what I would say is my guiding principle is seek difference. Those are your potential new friends.
Okay, so Steve wants to hone in on Friday, right? And
Yeah.
Steve asked, "Can you paint a quick sketch of what's going fast after
Yes.
this being a slower, more
Yeah.
thoughtful
I
process?"
sure can. Thank you, Steve. And so here's how I would think about Friday. We need ruthless prioritization. So and what I mean by that is that for the most part, organizations that we work equally on everything. We think everything is equally important. But what we know is that organizations that win, they have ruthless prioritization and they know this is what I'm designed to be great at and this is what I'm designed to be bad at. Not bad for sport, bad in the service of great. And if an organization can't discern between these two, they're going to end up with exhausted mediocrity. And so, what we have to do for our employees and the rest of the organization is here's what we're going to optimize on. That's half the story. And here's what we're not. So, I'll give you an example of this. And the example is from Steve Jobs. And if those of you that are a bit techie and you remember 20 years ago when Steve Jobs walked out on that worldwide developer conference stage with a manila envelope and it had a MacBook Air in it, and he slid out that MacBook Air and the crowd and the world went crazy because it was the lightest weight laptop in the world. Well, he very, very openly said we are best in class at weight because we are worst in class at physical features. We
Mhm,
could have been best in class at physical features, but then we would have been worst in class at weight. Or we could have chosen to be average at both. But then we would have had to rename our company, and then he made fun of another company that I won't say here. So we will end up, if we aren't deliberate, we're going to end up with exhausted mediocrity, constantly getting better at the things we're bad at, which without realizing it means we're getting worse at the things we're good at. So the most important thing we can do on Friday is to articulate this is what we want to be disproportionately good at, and thus this is what we want to be disproportionately bad at. And there's a whole other series of things, but that's the most important one.
mhm. Speaking of Steve Jobs, we have a question where they ask, "Do you think that the culture in Silicon Valley is changing from break things to fix things, particularly as it pertains to not only their own companies but broader societal problems?"
Yeah, so I not in all of Silicon Valley. So I think we can famously see it's not clear to me that Twitter is moving fast and fixing things. But what I will say is that look at Uber today, and I had the pleasure of going and working with Uber back in 2017 when they were in a move fast and break things. They are moving fast and fixing things now and going at a catapulting speed. Or ServiceNow didn't ever even go through move fast and break things, is just moving fast and fixing things. Stripe is doing the same thing. Airbnb is now moving fast and fixing things. So what I would say is that um, Silicon Valley can now choose to move fast and fix things. Whereas in the past, I think they only thought they had the choice of going slow or moving fast and breaking things. Today, we have the choice, and more companies are making that choice.
Mhm. And so Bill asked, which one of these steps do you find the most commonly in need of that companies need the most help with? So you laid out Monday through Friday. Is there something
Yeah.
that sticks out often?
Well, I'll tell you that if companies are really pressed for time, they skip Thursday, and that's to their peril. Because if we skip Thursday, that means we have to be present and we're a bottleneck for everything. That means people need us to translate why this is important. So I'd say that Thursday is the one that's most often skipped, and I encourage you not to. And then I would say that Tuesday is the one that's most often misunderstood because of all of the myths I mentioned that we have about trust. And we just think, oh, if trust is broken, we have to work around it, as opposed to going right through it and rebuilding trust.
Mhm. So Thursday, that's the storytelling, honoring the past, describing it simply, right? So
Yes.
why do we struggle to describe things simply?
Oh, I don't know what your inbox looks like on your email, but you tell me how many long emails you have.
I refuse to deal with my
Yeah,
inbox. I'll
okay.
deal with it
Well,
later.
so Mark Twain was right. I apologize for sending you a long letter. I didn't have the time to send you a short letter. It's the metaphor for all of this, that when we understand something in a complicated way, we want to benefit people from the entirety of our knowledge, and we just throw up all of it on people as opposed to realizing the beautiful curation and skill that's required to go from understanding it deeply to understanding it elegantly in its simplicity. So I think it takes time. It takes skill. Like there are professional communicators for a reason. They're really good at it. But if you're on your second draft of something, you have no chance of describing it simply. So I would say, unless you're on your 10th draft, you're probably describing it in too complicated of a way.
Yeah. So can I ask you a little bit more of a personal question,
Yeah,
Professor?
anything.
So Abby asks, how do you apply the essential steps to moving fast and fixing things in your own consulting role? So Uber and all the places that you
Yeah.
help.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, when we've been successful, it's when organizations come to us and they say, "Here's our problem, will you help us?"
Mhm.
When we've been unsuccessful is when we go to the organizations and we're like, "We think you're having a problem." So pull works, push doesn't. So the only thing we can't provide is the desire to change. And so I would say personally, make sure there's an opening and then you can be super helpful in fixing a problem. And I also would say that all of this applies to ourselves. I mean, that ruthless prioritization, so many of us are trying to be good at as many things as possible at work, at home, daughter, sister, cousin, parent, friend, as opposed to, I'm going to kill it at work, kill it at home, and I am not going to be good, not now, not going to be as good at all of these other things. So you can either choose exhausted mediocrity or you can have the nobility of excellence. These things are choices. So I think all of this applies to ourselves.
So let's go back to Tuesday where you drew that triangle with
Yes.
logic and empathy and authenticity. So Hung asked, between logic and empathy, which one would you say an individual should develop first? And Hung really
Oh.
describes just having a left foot and right foot and not knowing which one to go forward.
Yeah. So here's what I would say, Hung, is that ask yourself, I bet you're trusted most of the time, which means people are experiencing your authenticity, logic, and empathy most of the time. But ask yourself the last time or the most recent times you had a skeptic, you had someone who was doubting you, who they were wobbling on your trust. Ask yourself, what is it that they doubted about you? And if it's that they doubted your logic, double click there. If they've doubted your empathy, double click there. And that is, each of us has what we call a wobble. Each one of us has a pattern where the distribution of these is higher for one or the other. That's the sequence I would go in. There's not some generic sequence that is better. All three of these pillars are equally important. But I bet for each one of us, one tends to be more shaky than the other. And that's what I would go after. Now, I will
Mhm.
just tell you the distribution in the world, the vast majority of us have empathy wobbles, then logic wobbles, then authenticity wobbles. But that doesn't help any of us specifically. It just tells us we have lots of company.
Okay. So we got a lot more questions and a little time. I want to get as
Okay.
many as I can in,
Okay.
but
I'll go super quick. Yeah.
no, take your
Okay.
time. But I just want to let you know you're
Okay.
pretty popular in this conversation. Rock star, as Allison said. Tara asked, how can company leadership make sure that their messaging is actually heard and understood? I feel like you touched on this a bit with
Yeah.
simplicity.
Yeah. And I think that the way to do it is talk to people about your message that didn't hear it directly from you, and see how well they understood. That tells you whether or not it's reaching. So don't ask the people that were in the room, ask the people that were spoken to by other people in the room. That will tell you how well it's there. And if it took you a long time to describe it, I promise you it's not going to be heard.
Mm. Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Probably need to shorten my own stories a little bit there. Simplify it. So Karen asks you, how do you handle employees who are not willing to accept others' points of view and be open-minded? I mean, you described this uniqueness and diversity, but there
Yeah.
are people who are holdouts that don't see the advantage of that.
So I often find those folks are an education away, because if I can let you know that if I get to benefit from everyone's point of view and you only get to benefit from some people's point of view, I will competitively thump you. So let's say you don't have the moral imperative wanting to do it. Well, the performance imperative, we have found that organizations that are inclusive get a 200 to 500% boost on employee engagement and team performance with no new people, no new technology, simply the act of being inclusive. So the person who doesn't want to be inclusive, I'm going to ask them, can their career afford performing so suboptimally?
Mm, mm. And so we have a question. The person didn't leave their name, so I don't have a name. But how much time do you spend on each stage? Some folks like to spend more time on stages than others. Does the team not move forward until everyone's satisfied with the current step? What do you do when you hit a roadblock on each stage and not everyone is in agreement?
Yeah. Well, I don't like consensus, so I'll say there. And so what I try to do is work on momentum, which is that I want to make sure that everybody's voices have been heard, but then you have to leave the decision to someone else. So what we want to do is make sure everybody's voices are heard and they had a chance to do it, but we don't hold out till the very last person. We move forward and then we can retrace and see if the momentum can bring people forward. So not consensus, I would consider it not consensus, and we have to make sure that everybody gets to air out what their problems are.
Okay. Well, Christopher asked our last question. How does transparency fit into this model, specifically this authenticity logic model? Does it have a
Yeah,
place?
it sure does. And I find that the most important part for transparency is on the logic side. So if you're going to say, if you're going to inspect whether or not I have good rigor and I have a good plan, I could say, oh, just have faith. I did all of this hard work. Or I could give you a glimpse inside so that you can see the inner workings. Now, I often call it a window of transparency because there's actually a cost of full transparency that I'm not always willing to take. But a window of transparency, I think we always need. So to me, the transparency part is let's be transparent about our logic so people can see it for themselves and they don't have to do it in too much of a faith based way.
Professor, that was all dynamic, and thank you for the illustrations. You made it simple with your
Yeah.
illustration.
All right. Awesome.
All
Thanks
right.
so much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.